Welcome to the Nature Advantage podcast, where we explore how we can become more distinctive by nature. As we become more habitually connected to technology, we become more disconnected from nature. Yet history shows many of the greatest leaders, inventors, and artists make nature a habit to find energy, clarity, and innovation. I speak to Grammy Award-winning musicians, Wall Street Journal best-selling authors, business leaders, athletes, and living legends you may have never heard of to discover why making nature a habit has been an integral part of unleashing their potential and how it can help unleash yours as well. Are you ready to discover your nature advantage? Let's dive right into today's conversation. Well, thanks for joining me. I am very, very excited that I get to have the opportunity today to speak with Chris Winfield and Jen Gottlieb. They are the co-founders of Super Connector Media, and they have lived by some really amazing quotes that have seemed to shape some of the arc of their life, the way that they've built relationships, the way that they've been building their business. And as we get going, I wanted to just kick off by jumping in with some of those quotes. I know this is something that's been near and dear to both of you, but you can get everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people to get what they want. Another quote that has always resonated, I know both of you have said this often, is you cannot always connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. Those are the quotes that I want to use to introduce Chris and Jen. Chris and Jen, welcome.
Thank you, Darren. So grateful to be here with you and to have you in our life.
Yeah, vice versa. I feel the same way for both of you. So these quotes have been key points in your life. Can you tell us a little bit more about why these are so powerful for you and how it's led you to where you're at today and doing what you're doing with Super Connector?
Yeah, I'll start with the first one, then I'll let Jen talk about the dots connecting. So the first one's from Zig Ziglar, the late Zig Ziglar. Mm-hmm. And for that, he's talking about the idea that the more people you help, the more it helps you. And that was something, I don't know that for a long part of my life that I didn't necessarily live by. I grew up always thinking like, there's only a limited amount and that you always have to be in competition or you have to have the right luck or whatever to succeed and get ahead and everything like that. And once I really started living more on what we'd call like the creative plane rather than the competitive plane, amazing things started happening. And the more that where I really get fulfillment is seeing good things happen to good people. So the people that we work with, when we get them on media or when something really big happens for them, that's like more exciting to me. And I get more fulfillment out of that than any amount of money that I make directly, or if it's getting myself on TV or anything. So the more that I help, the more that I feel fulfilled. Now, it's not necessarily what I wake up thinking, and it's almost counterintuitive. Like I wake up thinking, oh my God, I got to get whatever I can for myself. But really being of service and helping people is always how I feel better.
That's right. So what Chris is really saying, he's incredibly selfish. He thinks only about himself, right?
100%. Exactly.
Because of the mass amounts of fulfillment that you get through the process. No, it's so true. I can totally be a testament to that. I've seen that, and it's just amazing just seeing the willingness to constantly serve, help, introduce, connect. It's phenomenal. So thank you for sharing that, Chris. And Jen, for you, the Steve Jobs quote, tell us about that.
That quote, so I had never heard about that quote until Chris over here shared that quote with me. And I was like, I heard that quote and I was like, oh my God, my entire life now makes sense. It all makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because that quote is just such a beautiful reminder that every single thing that has ever happened in my life, every amazing moment, and especially every horrible moment where I was on the bathroom floor hysterically crying, thinking that my life is over and it's never going to be the same. Every single moment, those are all dots that connect me to exactly where I am right now. And you don't know that during it. Like at the hardest times in my life, I remember waking up every single day at this one specific time saying, one day I'll know why this happened. One day I'll know why this happened. But you don't know why in the moment. You don't know why. And it's so hard, and it feels horrible. It feels like you'll never get out of it. But no matter what, when you look backwards and you connect all the dots and all the things that happened throughout your life to get you to this moment, every single one of those horrible things or times where you thought that the world was ending was an important thing that needed to happen to lead you to where you are today. And if I can remember that all the time, which I don't, believe me, I don't, but if I can remind myself of that, and we have that quote hanging on our wall in our bedroom, where is it? It's in our living room now. Then it can get me through those harder times, because I know for sure, no matter what, I will be grateful for that dot when I look backwards.
Absolutely. So when we look back to those dots, we look back to those times, crying on the bathroom floor hysterically, right? What I have always appreciated about both of you is you're completely authentic about the mess of the journey to get to the success of where you're at today. And outside of that, for anybody that doesn't know the two of you, outside of being business partners, you are a couple. Like you're an amazing couple, which is part of what I think is so cool. You've been able to meld and mix that together, and that's not easy to do for many others, and do what you're doing. See, and they're both nodding their head. No,
it's not
absolutely easy. Right. It can be incredibly challenging, but you've been able to do that. So when we look at those dots connecting to where you're at today, what have been some of the ways that you've gotten to a place of living in a state where at least you feel like you're pursuing a far more fulfilled life, at least pursuing excellence as you see it, and getting off the path of mediocrity? Because I think both of you, I know Chris, you were doing productivity specialist and different things like that. Jen, you had a storied career. You were on VH1. You were doing all these things, but it was stuff that really at your core you didn't love. How did you break that cycle? What transpired?
Well, I think for me, the quote, shit has to happen for the shift to happen. That's another one of my favorite quotes. And I really believe that when we're out of alignment, the universe will it's a universal law that I think that it'll come in and smack you into alignment. It just will. And so I think that all those bad things that happen and all that happened to me in my life that made me go on the path and the journey that ended up leading me here, I don't know if I would have given myself those gifts. Like, I don't know if I would have taken those steps to get out of where I was, but something really bad had to happen to get me out of it. And remembering that it's always like, especially during this time, of coronavirus and COVID and all these bad things that are happening, it's a nice reminder to think, okay, we're getting shifted maybe back into alignment. Maybe that's what's happening. And looking back and remembering that was a gift, that those bad things had happened, because that is really what put me on this path, is realizing, holy crap, I'm so out of alignment that this horrible thing happened to me, and I have no choice but to start over and to start showing up as my authentic self and doing what I know that I was put on this earth to do, even though I'm scared. I had no choice because I was forced to. And I think that I know that remembering that is such a gift, even when it's hard, is always going to lead me on the right path.
Wow. Thank you. Now that's really insightful. Anything else to add onto that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. And there's so many times that in my life where I thought it was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me, whatever happened. And those have, varied there, whether that was, getting sober and winding up in rehab and, 9.5 years ago, and waking up in the rehab and writing down, today's the worst day of my life. And, having that thought, and then looking back 6 months later and realizing that was the best day of my life. Now, sometimes, it takes time to get to that. It takes time to understand why something was happening. Even during this, everything that's going on with coronavirus and pandemic. And, you know, we live here in New York City. I lived through 9/11 in New York City. And that was a really, really difficult time for me. And I lived through, you know, 2008 financial crisis. I lived through all these different things. And what wound up happening with this is like it brings up all kinds of like trauma. It brings up all kinds of things that I didn't even, you know, really realize. And, you know, and it made me think like this time, there's not going to be any good. There's not going to be any lessons. I'm never going to look back at this time and be like, wow, thankfully that happened. And, you know, I had that thought many different times because this is very, very challenging. It's probably, you know, one of the most challenging things that any of us have ever gone through or will ever go through, hopefully. And having that thought of, wow, I'm never going to feel good coming out of this or feel like there was any good lessons. And to be honest, there's already things that have come and there's already shifts and there's already major growth as a result. And it's, you know, again, like it's just a matter of willingness to be able to change and look back and be like, okay, I was wrong.
Absolutely. So, right, we're in the midst of coronavirus right now, and it's just nuts. And you're at the epicenter of it in New York. What, before you got to this point of all of the shit happening so that these shifts can happen, right? As these are going through here, as those things happen, is that, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Let me pause this. Okay, folks, so Chris and Jen, before coronavirus, before we had any of this that took place, what were some of the practices that you were doing? What were 2 or 3 daily habits or weekly habits that you had individually, or even things that you did together that helped you to get away from some of those messes, right? So Chris, you just talked about how the worst day became the best day. That doesn't just happen with just thinking that one day and it just becomes a reality. What's some of the work that went into that and even brought the two of you together?
A lot of work. A lot of work on myself, and whether that's through groups, through therapy, through recovery, through just also having to get to a place where being okay with talking about the bad stuff and talking about fears and talking about insecurities and imposter syndrome and all these things that I kept in for, you know, the vast majority of my life. But it got to a point where that just didn't work for me anymore as a person. And, you know, what I found is that whenever I get back to that, whenever I'm focused on what I want people to think about me and what I'm more caring about what they're thinking rather than about what's true for me or the things that are actually really important, I'm not in a good place. It's across the board. And there's no amount of money, there's no thing I can buy, there's nothing that like makes me feel better. And that's something that I've had to learn over and over and over in my life. So I think one of the greatest practices for me has been just having a great gratitude practice and always writing a gratitude list. If I'm in a good place, I'm writing also a future gratitude list. So being thankful for the things that haven't, you know, that just haven't showed up yet, but they're here. You know, and I typically do that. Like I write it out for the day of how I want the day to go. And that's what I did this morning, you know, and said, hey, we'll have this interview with Darren. It'll be amazing. Be able to help somebody and, you know, those types of things. Because I think for me, a lot of times, like my mind wants to go to the fear part of like, oh, it's not going to work out, or this is not going to be good. Or so if I'm in that place where I'm already grateful for something to happen, I'm like reprogramming my subconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference. So gratitude's been such a huge one for me.
I love hearing that too, again, because it just brought me back to when you said like what brought you two together or what's something that you guys do together. So before I met Chris, I was also doing that same thing that he was doing. I was doing a gratitude list and a future gratitude list, but I didn't know my future gratitude list was called a future gratitude list at the time. It was today will be amazing because. So every morning I woke up and I would write my gratitude list because I knew for a fact that it was impossible to feel sad, angry, anxious, and grateful at the same time. Gratitude conquers all. When you feel grateful, it is impossible to feel lack. So every day I would start my day with that. And then I would say, today will be amazing because, and every day I would write, today will be amazing because I'll meet the love of my life today. That was the first thing on my list all the time. And it's funny because we were both kind of doing the exact same thing at the same time. And I truly believe that I manifested him by, visualizing what he was like and knowing that he was coming and doing that future gratitude list. And I still do that every single day. I still do my future gratitude. It gets harder. I'm going to be totally honest. It gets harder to do future gratitude when we're in a state of a global pandemic, when it really feels like, wait a minute, everything that I did not put coronavirus on my vision board. It's not on my 2020 vision board. So is this all real? Like, what's happening? And I just have to always remind myself, something that is great, something that I practice is just to remind myself that God works in mysterious ways and it is this or something better. So everything that is happening for us. And if we can flip it around and think this is happening for me and still believe you don't, and we say a lot of the time, Chris helped me to learn this and really fully embrace it, is you don't really have to believe in anything 100% because we're humans and humans don't really believe in anything 100%, but you just have to believe a little bit more than you don't. Just a little bit. And so every morning, if I can just believe a little bit more than I don't, that if I do my gratitude, my future gratitude, if I start my day with a really strong intention and I just come from a place of love, that the things that I want will manifest. And they won't manifest necessarily in the way that I want them to. Maybe they'll manifest in a better way, in something that's completely different, but way better.
And it might be bumpy on the journey to get to where we're trying to go. The path there might not be the way that we're thinking. Is that fair to say?
Darren, it probably will be bumpy, but here's the thing. The bumps are what makes us who we are.
Right. So it's really interesting you just brought that up. I'm reading this book and this morning they were talking about what happens when you're let's say you want to manifest something, or so you're visualizing it, and think of a road and a skateboard. And then, so on the other side of the road is the thing that you're looking to manifest. Now, if you're not putting up any resistance or anything like that, then it's just going to be a smooth road and you're going to be able to go right over and get to the thing that you're manifesting. So whether that's an amount of money or relationship or whatever. Now, what happens though is our egos come in and all these things. And so we make it harder because we don't believe, or we don't practice, or we don't, stay consistent. So then it adds bumps and rocks and all these different things onto the road. So you could still get across. It's just going to take you longer, and it's maybe not going to feel quite as good, but you can still get across even with not believing or any of those things. Now, if you let your ego drop and you let go of resistance, it's just going to be a smooth road and you can get right over it. So it's so weird because I read something every morning, and that's what I read this morning. And it was a really beautiful way to think about it.
And here we are talking about it. Now, I know you've both individually done gratitude lists, future gratitude lists. It's brought you together. Chris, we've had a brief chat in the past, and you mentioned in the past, the two of you do future gratitude lists weekly with each other for some of your wins, your gratitudes that you plan to have collectively together. Can you tell us a little bit more about the importance of that, where you do it and why you do it the way that you do?
Yeah, and it's really whenever we're looking, let's say we have an event or we're looking to plan out something new or a new direction or a new product or a new offering or anything like that, we always go for a walk and just discuss it. And I'll start discussing it, and then Jen will turn it around into as if it's already happened and what we're grateful for. And it's unbelievably powerful in terms of being able to accomplish and get anything that we've really wanted. And I don't know why with walking, and this was another thing that kind of brought us, you said like, what are the things that brought you together? And one was just like walking throughout New York City. It was something that Jen always used to do. Like our first true date, we walked like from like 15th Street to 72nd Street, or something like that after dinner. And now, even with everything going on, like taking a walk is like the big highlight of the day. So when you and I were talking about the power of that, and then you started talking about like the work that you were doing around, it was amazing to me, because that's for us is the most powerful part.
I want to chime in because it just reminded me, when I was single, I used to take those walks by myself. And the thing I love more than anything in the world, people are like, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do? I'm like, I don't really like to do anything except like walk around New York City. And that was my favorite thing to do in the world. I would take the subway all the way downtown, put in my headphones, and then walk all the way back up. And when I would walk, I would embody who I wanted to be in my future. And I would walk like her, and I would think like her, and I would imagine that my partner was next to me on those walks. And so now when I get to walk with Chris on those exact streets that I used to walk by myself and just think about, oh, I can't wait till he's here with me and he's here. It makes you believe so much more. It's really incredible. I really feel like the power of movement mixed with manifestation and actually embodying what you want and feeling it in your whole body as you move and being out in nature and being out in the environment, it makes it, they say like believing is the secret. And so you can visualize it and like you can think about it, but you can't really believe it until you feel it. And I think that movement, I know for me, movement makes me feel it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And what I'm hearing is it's the movement, it's the visualization, but it's also having the right canvas, right? To paint on. The environment is huge, and just being out in nature, just being outside is that right canvas, right? So if we're trying to utilize, use a material that's incorrect, that's not going to take what we're trying to put in, it's never going to stick, right? If you have a non-sticky surface and you try and adhere tape to it and it's not sticking, we're going to have problems with that. So that environment is a huge piece of why that all comes together for you. Is that fair to say?
Definitely.
And it's easy for us to look like you guys know I'm in New York constantly, or was before the crisis, everything that's going on right now. But even as a child, most of my summers from the age of like 15 through most of my high school years, I spent them in New York. I have family that's out there, so I'd come spend the summer out there. And everything you both talked about, I take the subway just aimlessly somewhere and just do an urban walking tour and just take it in. It's easy for us to look and say, well, New York, when it's going full bore, there's no nature around there. There's nothing to see around there. I know personally, I have found that to be not true at all. It's the hustle and bustle of everything that's going on in the city, but then you still find the leaves, blowing through the city in the middle of the fall, that cold wind blowing off of the Hudson hitting you, and it just refreshes you, and just seeing the trees, the parks. What do you think about that? Like in New York, can you still find those pockets of serenity, and how do you do that within a big city? Like what are some of your specific practices?
Yeah, so we used to live on the Upper West Side. So for anyone who's not familiar, think about like where John Lennon's from, and or where he lived, and Central Park. So we were like right in between the river and Central Park, and that was like a perfect balance. Here, where we now live in like Union Square, West Village area, and the river's still there. There's parks everywhere. There's all kinds of little pockets. And also, I think for us, it's just a matter of being out and walking and and just like taking in the energy. of people and everything around you. Yeah, it's so interesting because I was listening. I went for a run this morning outside, and I was listening to a podcast. This woman, Brooke Castillo, and she has something called the Life Coach School, and very, very successful woman. She was talking about like money and like if everything got taken away, like she goes and does all these like worst case scenarios to not be afraid of anything. She's like, if I lost everything, I'd be okay, because I thought about what are the things that are most that I value the most. And her first one that she brought up was going for a walk every day. And she's like, that's something that costs me nothing, and it's it's a non-negotiable for me. In terms of, I'll have to send it to you, Darren. It'll be really interesting for you. But like as just a time to listen or to come up with ideas, listen like to podcasts or talk to people and all these different things. And yeah, I think that is a really important one. And it's one of the, I think, gifts of this whole everything going on with coronavirus is like looking at stuff like that and being able to see, all right, wow, like that is just something that I value so much. And yes, you're right, it pretty much costs nothing. And it also can result in so much. Like I like to go out and run like pretty much every day. That's usually how I come up with ideas, are on those runs. And what I'll do is like, I'll just stop and text myself whatever the thing was. Or I'll text Jen or something to that effect. So yeah, I don't know why it works so well, but it does.
Yeah, I believe that nature is actually a collaborator, right? It's always there, it's always willing, it's always ready to collaborate, but we actually have to just pause long enough to allow it to collaborate and just put ourselves in it. And even with everybody's crazy schedule, I know you two are jet setters, and have been for years, popping to every corner of the country and even across the globe, many, many different places. But I've always noticed for both of you, you seem to be able to take those pauses. What is so important about taking the pause for you, whether it be to just take in nature, take that run, or just even you both have had a practice even at big events and stuff like that. You'll do the heart sign to each other just quietly, just across the room, to just say, I'm pausing and I see you and I'm connected with you. Like, what is the power of that? Nature's one of the pieces of that, but why is it so important for that pause right now?
I'll let Jen answer because she's so much better with it than I am and has taught me way more. Because the pause is not a part of me naturally. Like I have to build the pause into my life. And for me, that usually means that it has to happen in the morning. It's very hard for me to stop like during the day or once I get going or anything. So I have to build that in the morning. Jen's better at it though, so I'll let her.
I had to learn the pause by basically breaking down and needing to realize that, oh my God, I need to pause. It happened the hard way. A long time ago, I was obsessed with going, doing. I found my worth in doing and over exercising and over caffeinating myself and just always constantly on the go. And my body completely broke down and I didn't know what was happening and I didn't know why. And after that happened to me, I just started paying more attention to being where I am instead of always thinking of the next thing. And I think you said it so beautifully, Darren, like pausing. Just, I never even use the word pause. I just think like, oh, I'm going to go take a walk, or I'm going to just take a break for a minute. But it really is pausing and being just more mindful in what is right in front of you. Because especially here in New York, everybody's mindset, I think, in the energy makes you think 5 steps ahead from where you are, because it's just going all the time. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? But you can't truly create if you don't give yourself recovery time and if you don't actually take in where you are in the current moment and just take a breath. So nature and getting outside and walking for me is the best time for me to pause and actually take in the current moment. Like I pay attention to my steps, to my feet, to my toes hitting the pavement, to, like a building or a person walking by, and really like taking it in. And I think that being present, you have to pause to be present, and you have to take time. You have to take time to be present in order to recover, to be creative and create again.
Right. So I just want to make sure that we capture that. Getting outside, getting outside, first and foremost, taking that walk, it is conditioning the habit of taking a pause, right?
Yeah.
And the recharge that comes from that is allowing for the creativity pieces to go through. And there's been so many studies that have shown we're more creative, right? And we're all in that place, in New York especially, but in so many places, entrepreneurs, people in our day-to-day lives, we're just checking the boxes. We live in this society where we're just focused on checking the boxes, going, and we just get caught up with the quantity, but we can lose sight of the quality. It's fascinating because we're so attached to what? Like our cell phones, our technology. We intimately understand that when our cell phone is approaching 5% charge, what do we need to do?
Recharge.
You have to plug it in and charge it. The battery needs charging, but we operate like we're completely different from that. And that diminishes the quality of our decisions, diminishes the quality, the impact of who we can truly be. So it's almost like ironic, if I'm hearing you correct, like the best way to get to those 5 steps ahead might very well be taking that pause in the now, so that we can get to the real 5 steps ahead that we really should be, not just going to the ones that we think we see right on our path
100%.
in front of us. For both of you, was there anything specific that really triggered your intentionality to make sure that you were getting outside regularly and getting your experience and just collaborating with nature? Was there any defining moments that you can think of for either of you?
Recently, I was not taking walks. Yeah, we can talk about recently with coronavirus.
Great. With coronavirus, that's fantastic.
Been inside. Yeah, we've been inside, and yes, we always have worked from home. We've always, been inside, for our work day, been inside pretty much, but we didn't realize, I think we took for granted the fact that, we were traveling, or you could go walk to a restaurant, or you could, you get outside. But when we're forced to stay inside, you actually have to make an effort to go outside. So I wasn't really doing it enough. And I felt myself feeling so exhausted and not as creative. I really felt like, I'm having trouble writing. Remember, we were talking about that. I was having trouble feeling creative. And I was like, I need to go back outside, and I need to just start taking walks, because that is when my creativity starts to come. And the reason, it's so funny, because we think about like, I want to work so hard so that I can become successful. But we never think about our most creative ideas when we're working so hard. We think about our most creative ideas when we're in the shower, or we're on a walk, or we're in nature, or we're chilling. And I'm like, I need more of that space and that time in my life. And I took one walk the other day, I think it was like maybe 2 weeks ago. And it was a long, delicious walk where by the time I got home, I felt exhausted, but it felt like it was 2 minutes. And I had so many ideas, and I was so inspired, and I felt so good that I was like, that's happening every single day, no matter what. And I actually, if you look in my calendar right now, I marked them as W, so that other people on our team can't tell what I'm doing during that time, because it's blocked off, but it's for a walk. I blocked it off in my calendar so no one can schedule time with me, because that's so important, more now than ever before.
More now than ever before, right? So in these times of uncertainty, let's just unpack that for a moment, because what you're saying is more now than ever before. And you've both mentioned that in the hardest, what seemed like the most challenging, what were at one point the worst times in life, ended up being the fuel for growth, a real cycle of brilliance. You're both very well connected and good friends with Jonathan Fields, obviously, and his book, Uncertainty, using these times as fuel for brilliance. He talks about those certainty anchors and the fuel for brilliance that can come out of this. But we have to, break that cycle of, instead of I have to do more and work more to be productive, it's almost like we need to take a little bit of the counter approach. I need to stop more to be productive, right? And to get to where I'm trying to go. So
exactly.
Yes. So much yes. I love this conversation so much because it's
Yeah.
just
I am as well. I want to ask you both this. Do you feel like your intentionality with nature has actually been a significant differentiator in your personal lives, you know, with what you've done together and how you've been able to significantly grow Super Connector Media and just your own ability to connect with so many people? Has nature and those intentional pauses been a key differentiator for you?
I don't know if I ever really thought about it until now. And like when we had that conversation walking to go get juice in New York City, I'd never really put it together. And especially, I think the thing that throws me off is like the nature part, because I'm like, I live in New York City. Like, there's no nature, even though there is. We just talked about it. But just the idea of being outside. And I think for me, it's a good reminder of what comes from that, because I think of even recently where ideas, a lot of times also, like if I'm going to talk to somebody or catch up with somebody, I'd prefer to walk outside and do that. And I walk no matter what when I'm on the phone, like even if I'm here, like I'm not a sit down type of person. So I never really thought of it. But now actually after having this conversation, remembering and what comes of those walks, it makes me look at it even closer and more importantly.
I'm going to go back all the way to when I was a kid because I grew up, I don't even know if Chris knows a lot about this, but we had a big barn with horses, like a jumping stable. So it wasn't like a bar, like a farm. It was like high level Olympic jumpers, 34 stalls and jumping rings and these huge trees. And I would spend every single day at this barn cleaning up horse poop and jumping over the jumps and climbing trees and just getting dirty and building things. And that was a really important time in my life where I really harnessed my creativity. And I remember that was, and really harnessed being fully who I was and being able to just be me. And I tap into that little girl now. So when I tap into that little girl now, when I'm feeling lost or I'm feeling stuck or I'm feeling not creative or I feel not good enough or I feel like I'm being really hard on myself, I go back to that little girl when she was like at the farm rolling around in the dirt and climbing trees and being like a boy and not caring what anybody thought of her. And that brings me back to who I truly am. So in a sense, it's not like nature in this moment where, yeah, it does. I love my walks and they're amazing, but it's not like, when I was actually legitimately in the grass and the trees when I was a little kid, and having those memories and going back to that time is what brings back the most free and creative feeling that I've ever experienced. And it's a way for me to harness it now.
And that's powerful. Just in hearing that, thank you for sharing that. But I think it's really, really important to say we can have that juxtaposition, right? We can have the time in the barn, picking up horse poop, climbing trees and all that. It doesn't have to be that extreme. It could be putting your head outside for a moment or just taking that look out the window. Chris, you're notorious for taking those evening shots or those sunset shots of the Empire State Building, the view from your room. And every day that I have the opportunity to see one of those, every time that you put one of those there, it's a gift. It's not the Empire State Building. It's, the canvas, the backdrop of what we see, how beautiful the sky looks. That you said you lived through September 11th. What can we all remember about September 11th? It was a terrible day, but yet it was a beautiful morning. That morning was incredible, right? And for anybody that was in New York before the time happened, they know it was a beautiful morning. For me, I wasn't there that day, but I do recall that morning, what it looked like in the sky. And I can remember days in New York like that. So It's not a function of we have to go out and be in nature and detached from humanity for years on end. It can be as simple as stop what you're doing, take a look out that window.
Mm.
See the Empire State Building. I know when I get in New York, sometimes I get into the hotel and I'm close to 34th Street, seeing that. It's energizing, just looking up at the sky. So my friends, as we get towards wrapping up here, I wanted to just ask you if you could give any suggestions on practices to others that are wanting to live a life pursuing excellence and pursuing success. Any intentional practices about that pause, about those stops that they can do that really help spark that creativity, that collaboration, just so much that you talked about, creative problem solving, like anything that comes to mind that you could share.
Can I go ahead? No, you don't have anything?
No, I have, but you go.
I like to use the gym analogy a lot for anybody that works out in the gym. And this is really what helps me pause. And it's just a really nice reminder. When you work out your muscles and you have to like work them out and so that they break down. So you actually have to break them down. So work really, really hard. So it's painful and uncomfortable and you break down the muscles. And the only way that we get stronger is by recovering, is by stopping. And if you keep breaking down the muscles and breaking down the muscles and breaking down the muscles and you don't ever take time to recover, you're never going to get stronger. Your muscles are never going to grow. They're never going to come back together and you're going to actually get injured. So I used to be a personal trainer. So dots connecting, I always think about pausing now and taking time off and taking time to recover and recharge because our brain needs that as well. So if we're constantly overdoing it, staying in the office, just working, and we never take a minute to step out and be present and be one with nature and be on this planet and recover and recharge, we're never going to be able to get smarter. We're never going to be able to get stronger and take that next step because we're always going to be tearing it down. So I always think about that. And I think about, okay, if I'm going to take a day off from the gym, I have to take a day off mentally, or I have to take a minute off mentally. It doesn't even have to be a full day. If you don't have a full day, take 5 minutes, close your eyes and take 5 deep breaths, step outside, take a walk, if you can, I love taking white space days. So a white space day is basically like taking a day and not having any agenda, not having any to-dos, not even giving yourself a to-do, just allowing yourself to float, allowing your brain to be totally free, not telling it what to think, not telling it what to do. And every single time that I'm able to take a white space day, it always involves walking outside, always. And the next day, I feel like a superhero. I feel like I don't know, took a, in video games where you get like recharged, like rebooted. I feel that way after taking a day like that. So it's just proof that, we need to recover in order to get stronger in our mind, in our body, and in our soul.
Thank you, Jen.
For me, the thing that I thought of is just, and I think it's for everything, is it's like all about the people that you surround yourself with. So if you have people in your life that are intentional and that are good example, there's a good chance that you will be as well. And if not, then there's a good chance that you won't be. So I to me, it always comes back to that. The Jim Rohn quote, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." So I think about that with everything and we live in New York City. It's like people think like you cannot be intentional. You cannot take time. You cannot do any of these things. And there's just as many people here as anywhere that do that. So I think it all comes back to that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So from both Chris and Jen, what we've heard today is our messes can actually be the dots that create our successes. We can be intentional, even if we live in New York City, right? We can be intentional. We can take those pauses, those timeouts, and taking that is actually the birthplace of a lot of the creative spots. So that white space that Jen talked about, it's so huge for going through that. And if we're going to really pursue excellence, how can we really afford not to, right? Because if we're on the go, how can we actually envision what excellence looks like? I've shared this before, but I lived on the path of pursuing excellent mediocrity for so long, checking all the boxes. And then one day I woke up and realized, oh boy, that's just a path to exactly where I don't want to be. And I know you've both lived in that space and I have as well. So, it's always great to hear from purveyors of excellence, people that are actually studying it and working to live in that place. Because Marcus Buckingham made this quote, something along the lines of, you can't study failure to get to excellence. They actually have their own operating sets of principles. So it's looking at these little details, such as simply collaborating with nature, that can open up these doors for us. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your stories. If people wanted to find out more about you individually or more about you on Superconnector Media, where could they look?
Superconnectormedia.com. Super easy. Or you on Instagram, Jen_Gottlieb, Chris Winfield. Yep. That's pretty much it. That's where we're at. DM us. We're very available. We love connecting with people, especially your audience. So
absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for your time today, your insights, your wisdom. This was awesome. I really, really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you, Darren.
I love this. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Nature Advantage, and for subscribing and rating and sharing the show with anyone you know who will benefit by tapping into their very own Nature Advantage. The Nature Advantage is made possible by our three incredible sponsors: the Victor Wooten Center for Music and Nature, the Cure for the Common Life podcast with Joseph McClendon III, and 34 Strong. Be sure to check out information on our sponsors in the show notes below. We want to thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Darren Veresami, and leave you by asking, how will you collaborate with nature this week? I'm out.